Billionaire George Soros has handed £400,000 to a campaign fighting to stop Brexit, it was revealed today. The investment mogul is one of the biggest donors behind the Best for Britain group launched by Gina Miller. The scale of the financial backing will raise alarm among Brexiteers, with fears running high that the process of leaving the EU could be watered down or even halted altogether. Ms. Miller, who stopped working with Best for Britain after the election in June, also urged the organization to be more transparent about who was funding it. The news emerged as Theresa May gathered her Brexit war cabinet amid fears ministers are deadlocked over what end state they want from negotiation with the EU. Downing Street insisted that the UK will be leaving the bloc in March next year regardless of the growing clamour from Remainers. Mr. Soros has previously warned that Brexit will be a disaster for the economy and suggested the UK could immediately apply to rejoin the EU. The 87-year-old Hungarian-born financier is one of the world's richest men who made a reported £1.5 billion betting against sterling on Black Wednesday in 1992. One of Mr. Soros's foundations gave the money to Best for Britain, a Remain group that wants to force a second EU referendum. Ms. Miller, the millionaire businesswoman who took the government to court over Brexit, promised the biggest tactical voting effort in our history when she launched the Best for Britain campaign in April last year. The project was set up in office space provided by Sir Richard Branson, who gave it some £25,000 to help it launch, according to The Telegraph. Businessmen Stephen Peel and Sir Martin Sorrell, the chief executive of advertising firm WPP, attended a dinner with Mr. Soros last week. Best for Britain chairman Lord Malik Brown, a former minister and diplomat, said the group had followed rules governing financial contributions to the letter. He said, "We have never hidden our agenda. We have been campaigning hard to win a meaningful vote on Brexit, which we did, and to keep all options on the table, including staying in the European Union. We, like millions of people, believe that Britain should lead, not leave Europe. We work with campaigners, businesses, unions, politicians and community groups to make sure everyone has a strong campaigning voice." George Soros's foundations have, along with a number of other major donors, also made significant contributions to our work. Indeed, through his foundations he has contributed £400,000. George Soros had already made a fortune and a formidable reputation by 1992. But that was when he secured his tag as the man who broke the Bank of England, short-selling $10 billion worth of sterling during the Black Wednesday crisis made him a reported profit of £1.5 billion. The 87-year-old Hungarian-born financier is now one of the world's richest men. His wealth was estimated by Forbes magazine last year at £25 billion. Mr. Soros has previously warned that Brexit will be a disaster for the economy, and suggested the UK could immediately apply to rejoin the EU. One of Mr. Soros's foundations gave the money to Best for Britain, a Remain group that wants to force a second EU referendum. Over the past 40 years he is said to have donated £11 billion to philanthropic causes, but our small donors have collectively contributed more and the commitments of the other major donors also exceed this amount. So he is an important and valued donor, but his funding is one amongst many sources. In a statement, Ms. Miller said she had not been involved in Best for Britain since June. One of the greatest failures and sadnesses of the whole Brexit era has been the lack of transparency about key players' motivations, agendas and activities, and incompleteness of information that is placed in the public domain, she said. "I encourage Best for Britain and all those keen to play their part in the Brexit debate to be open and honest about what they stand for, whom they represent and by whom they are funded." Speaking on ITV's GMB program today, Mr. Farage said there was a real threat to the Brexit process, and Remainers were exploiting fears about the economy. "All that's happened today is that a few people have started to wake up to it," he said. "The referendum wasn't about an economic deal. It wasn't about projecting that in 15 years' time will we be richer or poorer. The referendum was about leaving the political union and becoming an independent self-governing nation." Mr. Farage also said he thought Theresa May was struggling to get traction in negotiations with the EU. I'm very pessimistic about the deal she is going to get. I want to be an independent country, he said. A leaked Best for Britain strategy document proposed a nationwide campaign in the coming weeks to wake the country up and assert that Brexit is not a done deal, that it's not too late to stop Brexit. It also called for a series of momentum-style mass rallies and concerts with a heavy youth focus. The document suggests the campaign aims to trigger a new referendum or election which the group will use to block Brexit altogether. We must prevail decisively, so reassuring Europe that our return will be permanent, it states. Best for Britain is a campaign group dedicating to moderating and ultimately reversing Brexit. It was launched by Gina Miller, the former model who successfully challenged the government in court over to Article 50 to encourage anti-Brexit tactical voting at the election. Ms. Miller left the group soon after the election and former Labour Minister Mark Malloch Brown took over as chairman. The group is actively fundraising for its efforts to frustrate Brexit, as well as big money donations from people like George Soros. It run crowdfunding, including a new campaign to stand up for free speech. It urged MPs to vote against the flagship Brexit withdrawal bill and campaigns to protect universities from what it describes as a right-wing witch hunt. The group draws cross-party support, frequently issuing statements from MPs including Daniel Zeichner from Labour, Tom Brake from the Lib Dems and Green Caroline Lucas. The board includes former Olympian Stephen Peel, economist Anatole Kaletsky, businessman Clive Cowdery, while the CEO is activist Eloise Todd. The Prime Minister's latest meeting with her Brexit war cabinet comes as the government prepares for a crucial stage of talks with Brussels, but there are signs that the subcommittee will again try to fudge choices over the thorniest issues like customs arrangements with the EU and the Irish border. There is not thought to have been any breakthrough at yesterday's meeting. It could be weeks until the full cabinet thrashes out a stance that will be taken into the negotiation process with Brussels in March. The cabinet subcommittee, made up of Mrs. May and her top ministers including Philip Hammond, Amber Rudd, Boris Johnson and Michael Gove, discussed the Ireland issue yesterday afternoon. The talks also covered the potential immigration arrangements for after we leave, while today the group is considering future trade arrangements. But there are deep tensions between the Brexiteer and Remain factions, with Mr. Hammond accused of trying to keep the UK tied to the EU customs union for years after we formally leave the bloc. The involvement of Mr. Soros was revealed in a story written by Theresa May's former Chief of Staff Nick Timothy in The Telegraph. Mr. Timothy, who backed the Leave cause, used his column in the newspaper to claim that Best for Britain wanted to bring down Mrs. May's government. He wrote, "The objective is to convince MPs to vote against the deal Theresa May negotiates with Brussels, regardless of its content and despite the risk that doing so could mean Britain leaves the EU with no alternative agreement in place." Malloch Brown and his backers believe that, if Parliament rejects the Brexit deal, the government will fall, and Brexit can then be stopped. He said it should be a wake-up call to Conservatives in Parliament, adding, however Tory MPs feel about Brexit, voting against the government when the deal is done risks something much worse. But Lord Malloch Brown said, "We think the British people deserve a final say on the Brexit deal and believe the country has been led down a dangerous false turn. This is a democratic and patriotic effort to recover our future and we welcome support for our efforts from many quarters." Mail Online has contacted Mr. Soros's representatives for comment. Best for Britain is planning to emulate Jeremy Corbyn's support group Momentum to force a rethink on Brexit. A leaked strategy document proposed a nationwide campaign to wake the country up and assert that Brexit is not a done deal, that it's not too late to stop Brexit. It also called for a series of momentum-style mass rallies and concerts with a heavy youth focus. The group wants to pressure MPs in 100 Leave-supporting constituencies, and sets out how organizers have a range of guerrilla marketing tactics to ratchet up the profile of Remain messages. The document suggests the campaign aims to trigger a new referendum or election which the group will use to block Brexit altogether. "We must prevail decisively, so reassuring Europe that our return will be permanent," it stated.